Kirsten. All right, Kirsten is dancing.
Got the shimmies today.
Doing her. I used to be able to. I don't know what happened. I'd have to practice it again.
I was going to say muscle memory, it'll come back to you.
There we go. There we go. All right. Good morning, y'all. It is Juneteeth, 2023. Juneteeth is the 19th of June. And it is actually now an official federal holiday in the United States. It was made an official holiday 2 years ago. The Juneteenth National Independence Day Act passed on June 17th, just in time for Juneteenth in 2021. The history of Juneteenth is interesting. The history of slavery in America is interesting, and the ways in which it is not over are interesting. The origin of the Juneteenth holiday or celebration is from Texas, June 19th, 1865. So Texas was the last state to implement the Emancipation Proclamation and to accept the Emancipation Proclamation. And the reasons for this are varied. Texas has always tried to walk the line between the South and the North.
Hold on, pause for just 1 second here.
Yeah.
I think we're glitching. Hold on. I'm going to try to check. Kirsten, if you could try to check on your end. But my restream is not confirming that we're live on any other platforms.
Mine is.
Oh, yours is?
Yep.
Okay. Just kidding.
Nobody panic.
It's a glitch on my end. That's fine.
So what happened is that it looks like we have some chat here.
Oh, we got a lot flown in.
Oh, I bet we do. I bet we do. Hello, hello. Hello, y'all. Hi, Chase. Oh, this is great. We got all kinds of stuff coming in. All right. So the Emancipation Proclamation was signed by President Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln, on January 1st, 1863. And I got my notes over here, so I get all the dates right. And the Emancipation Proclamation basically said that every state in the U.S. and every area that is controlled by the U.S. that may be in a state that is still, technically under the Confederation, that in all of these areas, slavery is no longer legal. And that was the Emancipation Proclamation in January 1863. Among the states that were technically still part of the U.S. and not part of the Confederate States was Texas. But Texas was the last state to enact the Emancipation Proclamation and to end slavery, at least official slavery. And that happened on June 19th, 1865. And you know why that is, there's a lot of history with, here's my Juneteenth pin. I've got my, there's a lot of history with Texas, and they have their Six Flags, right? The Six Flags of Texas, which basically is just an acknowledgement that they've only really got one foot in the U.S. That the other foot is variously in these other five nations. And a Texan will tell you, oh, this is history, we're an American state. And that same Texan 5 minutes later will threaten to secede from the Union, because Texas loves to threaten to secede from the Union.
We really do. It's like almost like a hobby, like a fun little pastime, like thinking about all of the different ways, or if we would be able to actually succeed as succeed in a succession.
Yeah.
Remember, even in high
ha-
school.
y'all tried that with the grid, with the electric grid recently, where you just seceded just your grid, and how did that work out?
I wasn't here for that. I was
Oh, okay. Well,
I don't know her. We don't know her.
spoiler alert, spoiler alert.
We don't know
It
her.
went very badly. So that was 2.5 years after the Emancipation Proclamation that Texas held out and maintained their slavery. Now, again, if you talk to a Texan, they'll say, "Oh, well, we didn't really have slaves." Well, that's complete bullshit. Anyway, and some of them will even tell you, "Well, we were never really, really part of the Confederacy," and yet that's one of the Six Flags, isn't it?
What they call our Six Flags.
Right. Well,
Texas.
yeah. Well, the Six Flags over Texas,
But in different areas of Texas, it's like Six Flags, and then it's got like another ending title. But the one here in Arlington is Six Flags. Ours is over Texas.
Oh, you're talking about the amusement park.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the Six Flags.
Right, but that's what it's named after.
That's what the amusement park is named after.
You thought that I meant it the other way around?
Well, I don't know. I was talking about the other way around. So yeah. So if you want a little bit of history of Texas, I highly recommend the film Giant, which chronicles the story of one family's ranch in South Texas. And it's a really great film. It's a little bit long, but it gives you a lot of history of Texas. All right, so because this was a presidential proclamation and it wasn't necessarily a law that had been passed by Congress, there was some there was some wiggle room there. And so Congress passed the 13th Amendment, which was ratified by 2/3 of the states and became an amendment to the Constitution on December 6th, 1865, which is just 6 months after the Juneteenth Day. And yet, immediately following the end of the Civil War and the 13th Amendment, the southern states simply enacted what they called Jim Crow laws. And Jim Crow was a caricature of of how white people like to think about Black people. Poor, uneducated, dense, and showed up in all kinds of posters. Again, you can look up, cartoons of Jim Crow and references to Jim Crow on the internet. But what this meant was that in these southern states, Black people couldn't eat in the same restaurants, they couldn't drink from the same water fountains, they couldn't use the same facilities, they couldn't use the same bathrooms, they couldn't buy homes in the same neighborhoods, they couldn't ride on the same buses, they couldn't use the same taxis, all through the South, including Texas. And this went on in one form or another all the way into the 1960s. So almost 100 years. Well, maybe over 100 years. The Civil Rights Act of 1964, followed by the Voting Rights Act of 1965, was the official end of Jim Crow. And I can tell you that traveling through the South in the 70s with a mixed band where I was, I was playing guitar in a band that had some Black people and some white people. And traveling through the South, in the 70s with this band, I can tell you we could not stay in the same hotels. we could not eat in the same restaurants. Jim Crow was still alive and well, even though it was illegal. And so really, this is just 40 years ago. And I know that didn't end like suddenly. And in many places, it probably still hasn't ended. When we look at the situation today, and this is why, I look at Juneteenth as an opportunity. For Black people, it's an opportunity for celebration, and you sing songs, and you celebrate your freedom. And in fact, the U.S. has come a long way since the Civil War, and yet there is still a very long way to go.
Yeah, I mean, it's come a long way, but it hasn't come as far as you would expect, considering how many years have passed since emancipation, especially not once you consider the civil rights movement and segregation time periods too.
And all of this was hard fought and hard won. It's not like any of this happened without a lot of protest and even some violence. And when white people say, "Oh, you don't have to go and have violence. You don't have to, take a knee during our sacred football game, whatever." Yeah, you do. You do, because otherwise change doesn't happen. Not change on this scale. All right. So let's look at the economics of the situation, because really all of this flows from the economics. Because we are today, slavery was always an economic thing, right? It was having people work and do labor without being paid. So today it's having people do labor and being paid very, very little, barely enough to survive, sometimes not even. The median net worth of a white person in the United States is $188,200 as of, when is this? As of
probably the last census, right?
This is actually from the Census Bureau, and I forgot.
Then it would be from 2021.
Yes, so it'd be from 2021. The average, the median net worth. The average net worth is almost $1 million, but that's because of income inequality, and ask me about the math another day. But the median net worth of a white non-Hispanic person in the United States. Oh no, this is 2017. It was $188,000. The median net worth of a Black American was $24,000. So it's like what, 12%.
That's a huge difference.
It is a monumental difference. Homeownership, and this is as of 2021, 72.7% of white Americans own a home. 44% of Black Americans own a home, and it ain't in a nice neighborhood. So the homeownership speaks to what I call generational wealth. This is wealth that you can pass on to your progeny. This is the kid inheriting their parents' house. That doesn't happen without homeownership. And it's also a measure of economic freedom. You can borrow a little bit against your home in order to get by during lean times. And, if you don't have a home, if all you've got is your bank account, a huge number of Americans are, literally one medical emergency or one, natural disaster away from being homeless. And the vast majority of those are Black and brown Americans. These numbers aren't a whole lot better for Hispanic Americans. They are a little bit better. The median net worth of a Hispanic American is $36,000. Their homeownership is almost 50%. But if you put those two numbers together, you get the disparity in where those homes are and what those homes, what those homes are worth. And you get a picture of income inequality is not just rich versus poor, it's also very much white versus black. And this is how they keep Jim Crow alive. There's a practice called redlining, which was made illegal, I think, about 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago. This practice says, well, there's some neighborhoods where we just want to keep only white people, and we're not going to sell to you, we're not going to rent to you if you're not white. And the white people justify this by saying, well, when we let these other people in, our home values go down. And that's only true because of the redlining. You take away the redlining and that effect will disappear very quickly. But you read these experiences and you can look them up online of where a black family is trying to sell their home. And they're offered half the value of what that home would have been valued at if it were owned. So what you'll see examples where they'll have the home appraised and they'll come in at a certain value, and then they take down all the family pictures. They put up pictures of white family. They have the home appraised again, and it's twice as much. And so, practices like this.
That's crazy. But wouldn't you say that that's more
real.
like, yeah, oh, that's definitely real. I'm not arguing with you there. That's definitely real. But do you think that that's also like the individual appraiser? Not to say like, oh, not all appraisers, but don't you think that would also be the, yeah, you're right. Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. Because it happens, and it happens often enough that it's a thing. And
yeah. Okay. There you go.
Yeah. And it may even be unconscious. I have this expression. It's one of the Bears laws that no one is the villain in their own mythology. How we see ourselves, we don't see ourselves as a bad person. Nobody does. No matter what atrocities they're committing, or no matter what bad things they're doing, everybody justifies it, and they say, well, I'm doing this, it's for the good of the children, or it's, for the,
like Jigsaw.
Yeah, nobody is the villain in their own mythology. So
yeah, I've heard something like that, where it's like you don't have to justify it to anybody else. You just have to be able to justify it to yourself. And I feel like for most people, that's like the hardest thing. It's like, oh wow, like everyone else is gonna hate me. Everyone else is gonna, think I'm the worst. And like you can't justify whatever action it is, not even to yourself.
Yeah, and we do this in small things. We do this in big things. So the actual state of race relations, that we could call it, in this country is incrementally improved from the 1960s and the 1970s. We improve by fits and starts. We take 2 steps forward, 1 step backwards. And on the one hand, it would be easy to say, well, we're making progress. And on the other hand, it would be easy to say we're making progress not nearly fast enough, because there are people who are suffering every single day under the system the way that it is. And these are human beings. These are people who deserve love and happiness and peace and prosperity as much as any other American. Rikiti?
Okay, I definitely agree. I'm curious if you would say this is a problem that is a problem because of actual citizens, or if it's a problem because of the government and the way that the government is set up.
You can't separate them.
No, I mean like your ordinary lay people, the citizens, the appraisers who are, acting on their own maybe unconscious bias. Or would you say that it's the fault of the government for setting up a system that allows people to still not be recognized? Or how would you define it?
My answer is the same. I don't think you can separate them. I think that the people tolerate laws the way that they are because they see them as okay. They see them as not a problem. And you know, it's insidious the way that this happens. And it's also very much different in different parts of the country, because the U.S. is a giant thing. The U.S. has more different states than the EU has countries, and each of these states has their own governments. They have their own districting laws and how they elect their representatives, and you know, a lot of this is consciously, although surreptitiously, designed to maintain the status quo.
Well, more than maintaining the status quo, wouldn't you say it's like designed to continue to make money? Like, I wouldn't say that it would be the citizens, right? Because I think at the root of, you know, racism or even unconscious bias, the root of that is just ignorance and just not knowing and not being taught.
No, it's not. No, it's not. Okay, so I'm going to give you my definition of racism, and I think I've done this before.
Okay.
Here's my definition of racism is the belief that one race, generally the race of the person who is experiencing this racism, is superior to that the people of one race are superior to the people of another race. And the test for that is to say, under the very same circumstances, if Black people were the settlers of this country and they had imported white people from Africa and made those white people slaves and gone through all of the same history, the same Civil War and everything, only with the races reversed, would the white people be doing any better today than Black people are today?
I mean, probably not, because if everything was reversed, then that means that the Black people who grew up and went to school and weren't taught about white history would just continue to be ignorant about what the white people had done if it was completely reversed.
You just answered it like a person who does not have inherent racism, and that's, you know, you're half Asian and half Latin American, and so you've experienced, not to the same extent, but many of the same problems that a Black person.
I've definitely experienced racism, and I still think, okay, yes, I think a lot of people are malicious, but I think that the way that they were,
I think that the average white person in this country would have trouble answering that question because they have not experienced what you've experienced. All they've seen is that, well, I work hard and I get rewarded and I have a house and I have nice clothes and my kids go to a good school, and that's what happens when you work hard. And a Black person or a Latin American person or an Asian person might say, well, that's pretty much not how it worked out for me. I mean, I've worked really, really hard, and we have not had that result. And so they see the systemic thumb on the scale. They see the systemic racism, the systemic bias. They see it every day. They have to teach their kids how to respond when they're stopped by a police officer, which happens far more often for their kids than it does for the white kids. So that they have to teach them how to respond in a way that they have a less likelihood, but not a zero likelihood, of getting shot in the head. And you know, the true answer to that question is, yeah, of course it would be the same, because there is no fundamental difference in the humanity of the two races. The race itself is a construct. You know, people like to say that, but it's also something very, 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 very real. Because, you know, we see somebody and the first thing that we see about them is what they look like, right? And our you know, our judgment wires go off, and you know, I mean, people who say I don't see race are lying through their teeth. Everybody sees race. It's the first thing that we see. The first thing that we see when we look at another human is, are they like me, or are they not like me? Because, and that's hardwired. That's part of our survival mechanism from when we were, living as tribes in caves. Is this somebody of my tribe, or is this person a possible threat? And that's just hardwired into our psyche. We don't get rid of that. What we do is we learn through experience, through history, that, okay, that person looks different than me. Cool. What can I learn from them? What can I enjoy in these differences? What are the cultural things that we're going to have fun playing with and learning about? Yeah. So, how you answer that is very much based on what your life experience has been. And that is the test of racism. And I'm not saying that racism is a character flaw. Racism is built in to all of us. We have to learn to overcome it. That's what separates us from the animals. What separates us from the animals is that, a cat sees a dog and it's, like, right? If I see a person who looks different than me, do I feel threatened, or have I learned to say, oh, well, I've known people who look exactly like that and they've been really great and we've made great music together and we've shared meals, and this is not a threat, but I have to learn that. That is not built in. Yeah. So that's my bit on Juneteenth, and I really wanted to cover that today. For those of us who are not Black, today is a day of self-reflection. It is, we can celebrate the fact that we've collectively stopped being, quite so horrible towards these people who are other than us. That we also really need to reflect on the ways in which we still are. This Jim Crow is not over. Legally it may be over, but the practices are still there. And it's been a long time since I rode in a van through the South with a mixed band and tried to stay at the same hotels and motels and tried to eat in the same cafes, but I suspect that it's not all that much different.
Yeah.
Today.
So, okay, well then, instead of, ending it like kind of, I don't want to say depressing, because let's take a more uplifting question then. So my next question is then, if it's not ignorance, then racist people cannot educate themselves to, I don't want to say fix their racism, then what do they do? Oh, so if they can't educate themselves,
they can.
That would be the next step, right?
Exactly. The first step in fixing a problem is acknowledging that you have the problem. And when I talk to people, I love politics, and I have a certain appetite for conflict. And so I'm on some of these politics boards where I'll talk with people who feel very differently than I do. And the problem is that they want to bury it. They want to deny that it's a problem. They want to say, okay, when the 13th Amendment was passed, all this ended. And if it didn't end then it certainly ended with the Civil Rights Act. We don't have racism in America today. Black people have all the same opportunities that white people have. They want to deny that the problem is there. And you do not fix a problem by denying it. I understand that it's uncomfortable. I understand that, but they cover it up with stuff like saying, oh, well, you can't tell my kids that they're racist. We're not trying to tell your kids that they're racist. We're just trying to tell your kids, here's history. Those who ignore history are doomed to repeat it. That's a saying. I don't know where it came from. Those who ignore history are doomed to repeat it. Yeah. And so this is not a history that we want to repeat. We want to we want to grow from this and continue to get better. And if you think you're already perfect and you think that there's no problem, you have no incentive whatsoever to get better.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So then that also ties into what I was saying earlier about, a lot of people simply not knowing the history. And it's like they They absolutely should know. It should be something that is taught in schools.
Yes.
But so tying back to the changing of a mindset and doing so by educating yourself. There was a super far right Nazi group in the United States. And this came out, I think, yesterday. The leader of this Nazi group, and it was like a full Nazi group in the US, preaching white supremacy, like very similar to the KKK. So the leader of this group went and did MDMA therapy, supervised as part of, like, I think, a clinical trial. And in the middle, yes.
MDMA. So for those who don't know, MDMA
is a chemical compound that was, really came into fruition in the late 70s. And it was used for a lot of clinical trials for improvement of mental health. And it was used in a lot of, mental health facilities around the country until it got leaked to the public. Public cut it with other stuff, which turned it into ecstasy / Molly. That's what it was known as on the streets ever since. And all clinical trials pretty much got shut down.
Yeah. So MDMA
even though they showed progress,
is a mood altering, perception altering drug.
Right.
Go ahead. So MDMA therapy. They did MDMA therapy on this
leader. Yes, on this leader of this, Nazi group. And in the middle of this, he said, "What am I doing? Google me. You'll see who I am. And what am I doing? This is so wrong. And I'm so wrong about all of this." And it changed his perception to where he was willing to educate himself. And he knew that what he was doing was wrong at that point. But before that, he didn't. So that brings up questions of, exactly. Forced him to look at his actions.
Forced him to look at himself in a mirror.
Right.
And I pray that most of us are capable of doing that without mind-altering drugs.
Right. So that's like tangentially related, and it came out yesterday. So I thought, that might be interesting.
My key light. Oh, look, you can see me now.
Let there be light.
Yeah. So, my recommendation is to travel. And the more you travel, the further you travel, the more you realize that what we consider normal is really just our version of normal, and everybody's got their own version of normal. I had the benefit of traveling a lot during the 80s and 90s with my work. I've been to many, many different countries and shared meals with people from very many different cultures. And, I very early on, one of my first overseas gigs was in Japan, which is, it's not an African country, it's not a Black country. But it opened my eyes to the fact that so many of the things that I had thought of as being just second nature, well, this is how it's done, this is how people think, this is how people behave, was just arbitrary. We eat with forks, they eat with chopsticks. It's just arbitrary. We somehow ended up eating with forks, and they somehow ended up eating with chopsticks. We write our words, out of letters that go like that. Well, they write their words out of letters that sometimes go like this, sometimes go like that. Sometimes they get a bunch of letters mushed together in one letter. We have our verbs. We have our verbs before our objects. They have their verbs after their objects. It's. I might hand you my business card. They're gonna bow and make a ceremony out of it. It's just, so many little things, just little everyday things. And then we can realize, hey, music, art, what we consider our standards of beauty. That's a big one right there. Our standards of beauty. We have these standards of beauty of people that fit in a certain package, dress a certain way, have skin a certain tone. In the In Southeast Asia, not so much in Japan, because they're already very light skinned because they're so far north of the equator. But you get closer to the equator in East Asia, and you'll see a lot of people, especially women, using skin whitening creams because they have adopted this standard of beauty that doesn't actually match even who they are. And there's a lot of cultural pushback against this, but you see this a lot in Southeast Asia. You travel to Europe and you see people who look like you but act very, very different, speak very different languages, do things very, very differently. Traveling Central and South America. These are people not very far from you, even, especially if you're in the southern U.S. You just cross over the border into Mexico, and you see very, very different ways of life. Different ways of speaking, different ways of raising your children, different ways of behaving, different ways of treating the different sexes, different ways of eating. Different ways of here. We leave home when we grow up, right? We get to a certain age and we leave home and we go make our own home. In Central America, you just, all get together in the same big home and all live there and maybe build a bigger one, with 3 or 4 generations of families living in the same house.
A lot of people can't afford to travel.
Yeah.
So as great of a suggestion as that is, you have to think about us mere peasants.
Oh, you can travel around the US and you can get in your car and you can drive, or if you don't have a car, you can get on a bus.
Have you seen gas prices lately? No, just kidding.
It may not be convenient, and you may not be able to do it. So get some books, and go to the library. Go to the library and travel through the books. You can certainly do that, and I did that. Long before I was traveling, I was reading books. Of course, I was reading science fiction, so I was reading cultures on different planets. But let's see, I have my Star Trek pin over here someplace I could put.
I like that you went from having like maybe 2 pins to now I can hear your bowl of pins that you're sifting through.
And this is not even all of them.
No, it is not.
No, I got a bunch of new ones yesterday. These are all different pride pins. So I'll be modeling some of those later in the week. This is one of my favorites here. It's still in the package, so it's hard to see.
Oh, that's cute.
Purple heart. We have the trans flag here. I don't know, you can't quite see that. So I got a bunch of them. Anyway. There we go. That is Van Gogh's Starry Night, but with the TARDIS.
Oh, that's clever.
As it was originally intended, of course.
I don't know if you've seen the Doctor Who episode where they meet Van Gogh.
I have always wanted to do that.
To meet Van Gogh or to watch Doctor Who?
I tried, and I do love me some good science fiction. I love Eggs Benedict Cumberbund, but it's only in like 1 season.
Of the Doctor Who?
Doctor Who, yeah. Don't they like rotate?
Was he in Doctor Who at all? He had his run as Sherlock Holmes, which is my favorite Sherlock Holmes. This is before he was famous, and him and Bilbo Baggins. I forget the name of the actor that played Bilbo.
Bilbo Baggins.
Yeah,
I never know exactly who you're talking about.
Yeah. Anyway, all right. So this is a little heavier than our normal episode, but thanks for those of you who did. Thanks for sticking with us through this. We appreciate you. We love you, and we will see you tomorrow morning. Same bat time, same bat channel. And that's it.
You've got something really fun to talk about, so I'm excited.
Yep.
Oh, that's true.
Bye,
We do.
y'all.
We have something fun to talk about tomorrow. Schumann resonances. That's just
Yes.
a little teaser.
Bye,
little
y'all.